Okay, so what is burnout and how can you avoid it in the workplace? Those are just two of the questions that we're going to be answering over the next 45 minutes or so. If we're just meeting for the first time, my name's Matt Balfour. I am a wellbeing content creator, facilitator, and proud founder of a company called Let's Go Wellbeing. We help organizations to create more engaged, healthier workforces with a reduced cost of absence. Primarily, that's done through the delivery of things like mental health first aid, alongside various wellbeing and inclusion workshops, including things like resilience, neurodiversity, menopause, and the subject of today's live stream, Stress Awareness 2024. So yeah, welcome one and all. If you're watching us live, please don't be shy. Let us know in the comment section where you're watching us from, what's brought you here today, and also if there's anything specific that you want to get out of the stream in the next 45 minutes. And the same question really going to you guys watching on the replay as well. Again, don't be shy in the comment section. Let us know where you're watching us from and what brought you here today. So just a sound check. Can somebody put a comment just to make sure that my sound is coming through properly? You can hear and see me okay. I'm not talking to, I can see there's 34 people watching. Everybody hear and see me okay? Yes. Okay. Mel Dalton. Thank you, Mel Dalton. Excellent. Okay. Vamos. Let's go. So what are we talking about today? Thank you, Dale. So we're talking about Stress Awareness Month, and it's actually been observed since 1992. Okay, so it's our opportunity to talk about the negative impact of stress alongside all of the proactive steps that we can take to prevent it from becoming a problem. Okay, so in terms of the objectives of today's live stream, what are we going to be covering? Well, specifically, we're going to be defining burnout. Okay. So what is it and what sort of impact is it actually having on the workforce in recent times? We're going to be talking about the use cases and also the reasons why we actually have different responses to stress. And also we're going to be talking about the physiological impact and also health implications a person's psychological state can have when faced with a stressful situation. Last but not least, I've also got 12 workplace adjustments that you might want to consider to help prevent stress and burnout from becoming a problem. So like I say, just setting expectation wise, I don't anticipate going for more than around 45 minutes today. I appreciate you've given me your time in what is the middle of the working day. So I'm going to keep it impactful. I'm going to keep it engaging. I'm going to keep it informative. And all I need you to do is lean in, take notes, and get ready as we talk about Stress Awareness Month 2024. Starting off with a definition of burnout. So let's just get this one up for you. What is burnout? What are we talking about today? Again, that's the agenda, impact of burnout, personal development and workplace adjustments. But what is burnout? Okay, so burnout, according to the International Classification of Diseases, which is the classification of diseases that most of the world use, it's used by the World Health Organization. Burnout is a syndrome conceptualized resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been met or successfully managed. Okay, so it's characterized by 3 dimensions, including feelings of depletion and energy exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, and also a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. So that's burnout in a very succinct way to put it. In terms of the impact, I'm actually going to be sharing just now a document that I got from the Health and Safety Executive. So as you can see here, Health and Safety Executive, work-related stress, depression, and anxiety statistics in Great Britain in 2023. So this was released in, as you can see here, the back end of November last year. And yeah, this is the most up-to-date and official document we've got on this kind of thing. And it's going to give us some statistics on, I guess, the impact of stress, depression, and anxiety in terms of the scale, and also the breakdown by gender, age, industry, occupation, and also kind of root causes as well. So I've gone ahead and actually, because there's a lot of information in here. So I've gone ahead and highlighted some of the things that I think are most relevant. Okay, so the numbers up front look like this: the scale and trend of work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. In the UK, in the year 22 to 23, there were an estimated 875,000 workers suffering from work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. This represents 2,590 per 100,000 workers and resulted in an estimated 17.1 million working days lost. It also accounted for 49% of all work-related ill health and 54% of all working days lost due to work-related ill health. And also as well, just to be clear, so this is from the Health and Safety Executive. They actually get these are the sources you can see at the bottom there is self-reported estimates from the Labour Force Survey, FYI. So those are the numbers up front. Then it kind of breaks it down by broad industry categories, those including human health and social work activities, public administration and defence, compulsory social security, and also education, as some of the organisations or industries that reported high levels of work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. And there were also a number of smaller occupational groups, some that were part of the bigger groupings that also statistically had higher rates, including protective service occupations, healthcare professionals, teachers, and other caring and personal service occupations. The thought here is that, according to what I can see here, these occupations, that they all involve higher levels of public contact and interaction, and many are also in the public sector. And then this one that I think is quite interesting, because I'm aware that there's quite a wide range of people from different industries that have joined the stream today. So this breaks it down by occupation more specifically, and you can see there the kind of top 5 or 6 are represented. You're talking about caring, leisure, and service occupations, managers, directors, and senior officials, followed not far behind by sales and professional occupations, all at the top there. It then also breaks it down by gender. So compared to all of the workers, males aged 16 to 24, 45 to 54, and 55 plus had significantly lower rates of work-related stress, depression, and anxiety, in contrast to females aged 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and 45 to 54. It does it by work size, and then it does it by cause as well, which I thought was interesting. So saying that the main causes of workplace stress, depression, and anxiety, according to self-reports from the Labour Force Survey, were things like tight deadlines, too much work, too much pressure and responsibility. Other factors included lack of managerial support, violence, bullying, organizational changes at work, and also just uncertainty. That includes lack of clarity about the job, or even people being uncertain about what they're supposed to do. So, I mean, these are self-reported statistics. So it'd be interesting just to know, I mean, let me know in the comment section if any of this is kind of resonating with yourselves watching. Is this indicative of, I guess, your experience in the workplace, in your current job role or previous job roles? And what's interesting about this one is that actually the General Practitioners Reporting Network, abbreviated THOR-GP, identified that work-related mental health causes by precipitating events. It said here that there was a similar pattern to the self-reported data from the Labour Force Survey, with work pressures as the predominant factor, but also interpersonal relationships at work and changes at work also significant factors. And that kind of sums up the numbers there. There's not loads more to go through there. I just kind of went ahead and highlighted the what I thought were the most significant parts. So yeah, let me know in the comment section. I mean, is that kind of representative of your experience so far? Because again, this was off again, it was self-reported estimates of people that presumably you weren't involved with it. So yeah, it'd be good to know. But yeah, so the headlines from that one, I guess in summary, 17.1 million working days lost, and that actually accounts for 51% of all working days lost in the UK. Workload pressures, interpersonal relationships, and changes in the workplace playing a significant role. Females aged 25 to 34 having statistically higher rates of work-related stress than all other age groups and genders. And also the inference here is that the more people-focused your job role, the more intrinsically stressful it is. So the inference here is that actually, based on the evidence, you'd be inclined to think that stress is always a bad thing, right? It doesn't paint a good picture, in my opinion. But actually stress, as some of you may be aware, is actually a short-term response to a recognized threat. So it's controlled by the sympathetic arm of our autonomic nervous system, and it regulates our flight, flight, or freeze response. So when we sense danger, the sympathetic nervous system takes over. It keeps us alert and ready to react quickly. All of which are great traits to have if you want to stay alive. In addition, the hormones associated with stress have a number of uses in day-to-day life. So this is anything from the cortisol required to raise our body temperature and heart rate to get us out of bed in the morning, to the adrenaline that you'd feel before something like a job interview or presentation. No pressure, Matt. The trouble, however, is that although neuroceptively we can tell the difference between an important meeting and nearly being hit by a car, which is definitely a good thing, interoceptively the sensation is indistinguishable. And that really is to say that if you are constantly in a high pressure, stressful environment, either at work, at home, or a combination of the two, your body will constantly be operating out of survival mode, the rigors of which over an extended period of time come with significant consequences. Chief among them is the loss of our ability to self-regulate, also known as burnout. So to put this in context, there's actually something called the Polyvagal Theory, which is what I'm going to be talking about next. So the Polyvagal Theory comes from the work of American author and psychologist Stephen Porges, and it posits that this part of the survival response in terms of burnout can actually be traced back millions of years to tactics used by our much smaller mammalian ancestors. So when being chased by much larger predators, freezing was sometimes the best option to avoid detection and actually stay alive. Call it playing possum. So in his book, The Polyvagal Theory, he explains how this system came to evolve in mammals, and what it means today in terms of our different responses to stress. So all of our responses to stress are regulated by the autonomic nervous system, of which a central role is played by this thing called the vagus nerve, which actually Charles Darwin called or referred to as the pneumogastric nerve. But in essence its function, it registers heartbreak and gut-wrenching feelings. It controls things in your body that we do without conscious input, such as eating, breathing, digesting food, and sweating, and also activates muscles in the face, throat, ear, and voice box. And it kind of explains what our kind of 3 levels of response to threat, or how they've come about. So 3 levels of response to threat, or 3 levels of responses to stress. Sorry. So the first one is actually social engagement. Okay. So that's controlled by the ventral vagus complex. And that's essentially when something distressing happens, we automatically signal our upset by our facial expressions and also our tone of voice, which are meant to beckon others to come to our assistance. Okay. We've also got the flight or flight response, which is controlled by our sympathetic nervous system. And when that takes over, it mobilizes our muscles and our heart and our lungs and gets us ready for fight or flight. Finally, if there's no way out and we're overloaded with stress, we activate the ultimate emergency system, which is controlled by the dorsal vagus complex. And this is freezing. Okay, so this system reaches down into the stomach, kidneys, and intestines, reduces our metabolism, causes a drop in heart rate, at which point we disengage, collapse, and freeze. Again, think about playing possum. So think about something that we can all relate to. Let's say a monkey, for example. If it spots something coming along that doesn't look quite familiar, it might signal to others that danger is approaching and call for help. If it feels threatened, it might bare its teeth and in the face of rage or terror. And if it's really up against it, it could just go into shock, freeze, and become despondent. I actually have a funny story to tell about this one. So I was in Costa Rica recently, which some of you may be aware of. Some of you are probably sick of me talking about it, actually. But the reason I'm talking about it is because they've got a lot of wildlife there. Some of that wildlife includes, tropical birds, such as toucans, and also woodpeckers. Okay. It also includes sloths, right? And it also includes alligators. The other thing it includes is monkeys, right? And you get this. They got lots of wild monkeys out there, howler monkeys, and the rest of it. But cutting a long story short, we were in this reserve, and I was faced with a monkey. And the reason I'm pinning this picture up is because I think it depicts quite well the monkey kind of transitioning between fight or flight and maybe the social engagement. So I was several feet away from this guy. Yeah, you can see him. several feet away from this guy, and he was kind of looking around, making noises, and then kind of looking at me, but with those eyes. And I'll be honest, I didn't feel safe. You know, monkeys look cute until they look like that and they're 7 feet away, right? And he looked like, I don't know, you tell me, what do you think this guy's about to do, right? He looked to me like he wanted to attach himself to my face, right, and wreak havoc. So yeah, responses to stress, people. Anyway, cool story about a monkey, and also the polyvagal theory. So the polyvagal theory, in essence, gives us an evolutionary perspective on our responses to stress. The Yerkes-Dodson theory, however, puts this in a context that is actually a little bit more relevant to the workplace. So what is the Yerkes-Dodson theory? Well, you may have heard of it or heard it referred to in your workplaces as the pressure performance curve. There's a video I'm going to play now that actually it depicts what it is, but I'm also going to just kind of talk through it. So hopefully as I'm talking, this will kind of match up for you. Okay, so the Yerkes-Dodson curve is illustrated by an inverted U-shaped curve showing the relationship between stress and performance. The curve suggests that there is an optimum level of stress between the two extremes, which maximizes performance. You could call this your window of tolerance. So everybody's window of tolerance is different due to childhood experiences, social support, and also coping skills. It's where the right amount of stress pushes us to perform at our very best. Think about the nerves that you feel before a job interview, driving test, or even a business presentation. You can handle the stress and stay clear-headed because you are in your window of tolerance. However, at times of extreme stress, you could move outside your window of tolerance and become hyper-aroused or overstressed. The sympathetic nervous system is engaged and the flight or flight response is activated, which can impede your ability to perform as it makes it difficult to stay calm and concentrate. On the flip side, stress can also make you descend into a hypo-aroused state, and this is where there isn't enough stress to get you motivated. So you may feel emotionally numb, exhausted, and lack motivation. And really understanding this tool and increasing your team's awareness of their own window of tolerance and what they can do to widen it will actually improve their ability to manage stress and perform more consistently throughout the working week. So that's the window of tolerance. Again, it's a visual representation of the relationship between stress and performance. So again, we've got the evolutionary kind of backstory to stress and our responses to it. We're now talking about, I guess, the window of tolerance and how to kind of stay in that nice operating window, balancing the measures of stress and performance. So it stands to reason that we probably want some way to actually expand our window of tolerance and avoid being overstressed and under or overstressed, and actually on our way to burnout. And to explain that in a bit more detail, I'm going to be talking you through something called, wait for it, the Biopsychosocial model of challenge and threat, which isn't a mouthful at all. So let's get this up on the big screen. Good stuff. So it was actually brought to us by a doctor called Mark D. Seary. It was published in the Journal of Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, actually back in 2011. But the Biopsychosocial model of challenge or threat, or BPS as we'll refer to it from moving forward, provides us with a framework to understand individuals' psychological responses in a stressful or motivated performance situation. Okay, so you can see there, that's how the model starts, with a motivated performance situation. So that is where it's a scenario where an individual must actively pursue goals, self-relevant or important. So situations such as test taking, public speaking, meeting deadlines that often carry meaningful consequences and are traditionally viewed as stressful. That is a motivated performance situation. Okay, at which point you get task engagement, which refers to the degree at which an individual actively participates in or is absorbed by a task, okay, or activity. So after task engagement, we move on to an evaluation of resources, which actually carry two distinct pathways and physiological outcomes based on whether the person views the task as a challenge or a threat. So the pathway of challenge arises on the left-hand side there. The pathway of challenge arises when resources, it's evaluated that resources meet or exceed demands. Okay, the pathway of threat occurs when demand is evaluated that demand exceeds resources. So physiologically, what's happening here? Well, the challenge is characterized by, as you can see here, higher cardiac output and lower total peripheral resistance, whereas the opposite is true of threat. So threat is characterized by lower cardiac output and increased total peripheral resistance. So total peripheral resistance, what does that mean? Well, it's defined as the total resistance to blood flow in the systemic circulation. So TPR reflects the net constriction or dilation of the arterial system. Essentially, with TPR, we're looking at resistance of all the blood vessels in the body. Okay. So you can see here as well, challenge or threat, you've got different things going on biochemically as well. So you'll see there SAM activation and then SAM plus HPA activation. So what does that actually mean? Well, when the body prepares to engage in a stressful situation by getting ready to mobilize its energy reserves, there are different things that you can see happening with regards to challenge or threat, which are obviously preceded by the psychological state. So with challenge, the pathway of the sympathetic adrenomedullary axis, or SAM, as we'll abbreviate here, prepares the body for a motivated performance by releasing catecholamines. So catecholamines are a group of hormones that are produced by your adrenal glands, and they include the likes of dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. With threat, on the other hand, it uses the SAM axis along with something called the pituitary adrenal cortical axis, or HPA. Now, the significance of this is that with SAM activation, the catecholamines can quickly rise, can help the person rise to the challenge. So the catecholamines released have a half-life of only a few minutes, which means that the person can quickly rise to a challenge or rise to the situation, take on the challenge quickly, and then deal with the task at hand and return back to homeostasis. Okay. So the catecholamines, the adrenaline, the norepinephrine, the dopamine have a half-life of just a few minutes. On the flip side, with the HPA activation associated with the threat pathway, it also releases cortisol, which has a half-life in the body of over an hour. Okay, so high levels of cortisol combined with higher net constriction of the arterial system over an extended period of time can result in negative health outcomes for the individual. So that includes things like poor task performance, less emotional stability, higher levels of anxiety, a weaker immune function, and eventually a higher susceptibility to burnout. In a nutshell, the BPS demonstrates that the cardiovascular responses to challenge or threat serve as indirect measures of our underlying psychological states when faced with a stressful situation. So in the workplace, you might describe this as the difference between vulnerability and resilience, or resilience and vulnerability. Okay, so what do we mean by that one? Just briefly to get the definitions correct here. So resilience in these situations is reflected in experiencing the stress as an opportunity rather than a threat, leading to evaluations of high resources and low demand, indicative of a challenge. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is characterized by perceiving the situation as overwhelming, resulting in evaluations of low resources and high demand, indicative of threat. Just check here. I can see I've got a comment. What's going on here? Oh, it's still on the small screen. Could everybody see that okay, by the way, when I made it large? Could everybody actually see the presentation that I was going through? I just saw somebody put that it was still on the small screen. Just let me know in the comments. So what influences our psychological states of resilience and resilience in a stressful situation? Okay, that's the question that we want to answer now. Okay, so we know that psychology precedes different physiological outcomes that have it's still small. Okay, can't see the small print. Give me one moment. So let me try that one again, because I'm conscious if I was just talking there, that was quite an important piece there. If you couldn't see what I was talking about, is it larger now? Better, right? Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so let me just talk through this one again. It showed up large for me, but yeah, obviously for yourselves, not much better. So let me just explain this one again. Biopsychosocial model of challenge or threat is the cost of doing things live. People, bear with me. So we're talking about the motivated performance situation at the top here. So where did we get to? So again, provides a framework to help individuals understand the psychological responses in stressful, motivated performance situations. And really, again, it's just talking about task engagement. So you get a performance motivated situation, something that's self-relevant and carries a consequence. Then you get task engagement, which is the degree to which somebody will throw their resources into a task. And then you have an evaluation of resources. Okay. So you can see there that depending on the psychological state that preceded the task engagement, there are two different pathways associated with two different physiological pathways associated with whether the person evaluates that they have high resources and low demands, which is a challenge, or if they have low resources and high demands, which is a threat. Okay. So again, with a challenge, you're talking about SAM activation. So sympathetic adrenomedullary, I didn't have it in front of me, sympathetic adrenomedullary axis, okay, which is using to basically, it's the way that your body is using its resources to mobilize your energy reserves to deal with the challenge. Okay, so it does that by releasing catecholamines. Okay, catecholamines would be the resources or hormones that come from your adrenal glands. They include epinephrine, norepinephrine, etc., and they have a short half-life in the body of a couple of minutes. With the threat pathway, however, so if somebody sees things as a threat, they also uses the HPA activation along with the SAM. So HPA, pituitary, what do we get that one done for? Pituitary adrenal cortical. Just want to get it right for you. So that's also activated, and that includes cortisol, which has a half-life in the body of over a few hours. So the other thing as well is that you can see physiologically what's going on as a result of that difference in the hormones associated with whether we see things as a challenge or threat, is that there's a lower total peripheral resistance and a higher cardiac output associated with challenge, and a higher TPR and low cardiac output associated with threat. Okay, so TPR again referring to basically we're looking at the total resistance of all blood vessels in the body. Okay, so I spoke to you about the kind of difference in health outcomes for kind of going down one or the other. Quite clearly, if you're exposed to kind of higher pressure on your arteries and more cortisol in your system over time, that can result in things like, you know, poor task performance, less emotional stability, higher anxiety, weaker immune function, and also a higher susceptibility for burnout, which of course is what we're talking about avoiding today. Okay, so again, just coming back to in the workplace, you may talk about this in terms of resilience and also vulnerability. Okay, so again, resilience or vulnerability. So resilience in these situations is reflected in experiencing the stress as an opportunity rather than a threat, leading to evaluations of high resources and low demands indicative of a challenge. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is characterized by perceiving the situation as overwhelming, resulting in evaluations of low resources and high demands indicative of a threat. Okay. So with all that in mind, what influences our psychological state of resilience in a stressful situation? So there's a couple of things to talk about here. They are self-esteem and also stereotypes. So these are two things that were kind of referenced in the same study that I'm talking about, the same study that we kind of got the BPS from. So self-esteem stability specifically. Okay, so what does self-esteem stability mean? Self-esteem stability refers to the magnitude of short-term fluctuations around the person's typical baseline level of trait self-esteem. So what does that mean? Well, unstable high self-esteem corresponds to high trait self-esteem coupled with a high degree of variability. Okay, so relative to stable high self-esteem, unstable high self-esteem has been linked to greater defensiveness, together with susceptibility to external events, suggesting an underlying propensity for vulnerability. So essentially what it's saying here is only stable high self-esteem results in resilience. And what does that mean in terms of the kind of experiment that they did? This kind of puts it into context. So an investigation was done back in 2004 into the relationship between stable and unstable high self-esteem and responses to success or failure feedback in a reasoning test. Okay, so participants with an unstable high self-esteem showed cardiovascular responses consistent with threat after failure. Okay, while those with stable high self-esteem exhibited cardiovascular responses consistent with challenge even after failure. Okay, suggesting that there is a direct link between stable high self-esteem and resilience, while unstable high self-esteem may predispose individuals to vulnerability. The other thing you've got here are stereotypes. So what do we mean by stereotypes? Well, firstly, performing in a domain in which one social group is the subject of negative stereotypes creates what's called a stereotype threat. And that's an experience of discomfort related to the knowledge that one's behavior can confirm the negative stereotype. So, for example, and this was the example that was used in the study, there's a stigma that exists, or a stereotype that exists, that women are worse at maths than men. So the effects of stereotype activation and on the cardiovascular markers of challenge or threat were assessed during a maths test. And the results revealed, this is the interesting part, the results revealed that the gender bias condition, when the negative stereotype about women and maths was activated, women exhibited cardiovascular responses consistent with threat relative to men. So again, that's higher TPR, lower cardiac output, and also cortisol in their bloodstream. However, in the gender fair condition, which explicitly contradicted the negative gender stereotypes, women exhibited responses consistent with challenge relative to men. So really kind of underlying the importance of your psychological state when it comes to approaching a stressful situation, okay, such as in the workplace. So what I wanted to come to now, I wanted to shift to the workplace adjustments. We've kind of spoken about what burnout is, and also I guess what the impact is in the workplace. We've also spoken about the kind of the evolutionary backstory, and I guess the reasons for why we have our different responses to stress. And also now talking about, I guess, the window of tolerance, and also the link between your psychological state and also the physiological and kind of long-term health outcomes when it comes to approaching a stressful situation. So now we're going to be talking about workplace adjustments. And as I mentioned at the top of the stream, we've got not one, not two, but actually 12 workplace adjustments to talk about here. And I've put them on a nice grid, actually, so you guys can see what they are up front. Some of them are a bit more detailed than others, but I think they all kind of loosely link back to some of the things that we've already been speaking about. So, for example, with the stereotypes, one thing that you might want to consider is how discerning you are about your investment in your DEI strategy. Okay, so you want to invest in DEI because it's with the aim of normalizing conversations about the experience of people from different backgrounds to reduce the impact of social stigma, and I guess, thinking about the impact that negative stereotypes can have on a person's thinking, performance, and also long-term health. So again, just really building on that example from the reinforcement of negative stereotypes. Okay, so types of stress. So also, I'm asking, what is the messaging in your organization around the different types of stress? So the reason I ask this is because coping strategies, well, a lot of you will be familiar with things like the stress container. It's obviously a visual representation of our vulnerability and resilience, and also the fact that we need to use healthy coping strategies to prevent stress from becoming a problem. But that's the thing. Coping strategies don't just vary from person to person and change over time. They vary based on the source of stress. Okay, so whether that's emotional, environmental, acute, or chronic, whether we're talking about a breakup, a house move, loss of a loved one, or debt, there are going to be different coping strategies that are going to be more or less appropriate for each type of stress. And the better we can get at kind of clarifying and labeling the sources of our stress, we can get better at diffusing the negativity around it, prioritize and also prioritize routes forward, and move forward. So yeah, I guess the idea with this one is that it might be useful to think about how to educate people around the different sources of stress to make sense of their experience, but also useful to match up coping strategies with different types of stress, and also in the area that it's going to have the most impact. You could call it contextualized coping strategies. You heard it here first. So again, this is something that might be, I guess, common sense from the outside, but you've got to remember that a core kind of symptom with stress is that we lose our sense of perspective. So types of stress, everybody. Okay, so you also see here threat detection. So as mentioned already, when we looked at the BPS, we know that there is a health benefit to be extracted by consistently going down the psychological pathway of challenge versus threat. And to do that, it would be useful if we knew how we could, I guess, reset and change our threat detection system. So what is the threat detection system? Well, essentially, you've got three parts of the brain that make up this threat detection system. You've got the amygdala, which is deep in the reptilian brain, and this controls our responses and our fear response, sorry, and registers whether an external stimulus is a threat to our survival. Okay. In the middle, then you've got the hippocampus. Okay, so the hippocampus really acts like a filing cabinet and categorizes information based on a previous experience. You then have the medial prefrontal cortex, which is like the rational brain, okay, and is responsible for our executive function. So you could think of it, the relationship between the amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex, almost like a smoke detector and a watchtower. So in other words, as an example, when you smell smoke at home and the amygdala smells smoke, it senses smoke and it says, core, is it a fire? Do I need to leave? But then it sends that message through to the medial prefrontal cortex, and that actually says, no, it's not a fire. My house isn't burning down. It's actually just a steak sizzling, and it's creating a bit too much smoke. I need to go and adjust the the temperature or take it off. Okay, so just to give you an example, in an extreme scenario, such as with post-traumatic stress disorder, this pathway is actually broken, which keeps people stuck in the fear response. So how do you modulate and how do you kind of change your threat detection system? Well, there are two ways that you can do it. There's the top-down way, which is about modulating messages that come through the prefrontal cortex. So that's things like mindfulness, talking therapies, gratitude, podcasts, and also bottom up through the reptilian brain, through movement, touch, breathing, yoga, pranayama, breath work, massage, and that type of thing. Okay, so next one we got here, managing up. And what I'm talking about here is really thinking about creating a process for managing up with clear communication and pathways to help with excessive workloads without the stigma. I remember speaking to a person not too long ago, and we did a whole workshop about sort of resilience and stress. And kind of at the end of it, this person said, yeah, that was great, Matt. A lot of it I take on, but actually I don't feel secure enough to talk to my manager and say that actually I'm treading water here and the workload is unsustainable. So a part of this was because they linked their sense of self-worth to their ability to take on and complete all tasks, which on some level is admirable or admirable, but on other levels, it's clearly the path to burnout, right? So empowering people to manage up is really important for these types of issues. And also, just on that note, saving people from themselves. So what are your kind of rules around comms, after hours, working holidays, and also that kind of always on culture? I believe that there's a country, I believe it's in mainland Europe, that actually it's against the law to actually kind of have any comms after hours. Now, that's obviously not necessarily going to be viable for all levels of all organizations. But the fact is that if people have the option to work extra hours and be on emails until 9 p.m. every evening, they'll do that. But the good news is that the same is true in reverse. Okay. Another one here, leading by example, probably something you've heard on previous courses, but I think it's really important just to remind you that showing vulnerability and leading by example, sharing examples of your challenges, personal challenges, and also solutions where appropriate is really important and can go quite a long way. So thinking about the shadow that you cast, because ultimately people, as leaders, people pay more attention to what you do rather than what you say or type on an email. Next up, you've got nutrition. So I've done videos about this, and I've done workshops where I've spoken about the glycemic index and how it can be used to index the impact that carbohydrates have on your blood sugar throughout the working day. So it's basically giving you the blueprint of how to keep your blood sugar consistent and help you to avoid peaks and troughs in energy, which in turn leads itself to better concentration, task engagement, emotional stability, and also resilience. So as an organization, supporting healthy, balanced, and consistent eating habits in and outside the workplace is one thing to consider. So this could mean allocating budget to ensure that there's a wider range of healthy choices that are available on site, coupled with comms that are dedicated to helping people make more informed choices about their diet outside the workplace. Talking about advocates. So one of the again, the effects of stress that we can lose perspective. Part of that thought process can lead us to a place where we actually feel that we've got no one to talk to. And in some cases, some cases this is down to elements of management or leadership not being upskilled to put conscious bias aside, to use open questions, to build rapport and demonstrate empathy. And then on other occasions, no matter what you do, particularly as managers or leaders, the mere fact that you're a manager or in a senior position actually means that people won't feel comfortable kind of opening up to you. And in this case, it might be an idea to have advocates or trusted members of your team that can act as an extension of your eyes and ears around the business. This way it can kind of help you to avoid that kind of worst case scenario where the first time you know a team member is kind of at crisis point, facing something like burnout in this case, that they're signed off by the doctor is the first time that you hear about it. 4-day work week. So you may be aware that actually there was a trial of 61 organizations over the 6 months as a UK pilot back in 2022 that they trialed doing a 4-day work week, and actually 89% of those businesses were still operating that policy a year later, and 51% of them have made it permanent. But more specifically, more than half of project managers and CEOs said that the 4-day work week in which staff worked 100% of their output in 80% of their time had a positive impact on their organization. The report found that 82%, that for 82%, this included positive effects on employee well-being, 50% found that it actually reduced staff turnover, and 32% that it improved job recruitment. There's a couple more that I wanted to speak about here. That was also departmental localization, which is a concept and an approach to employee well-being that focuses on specific quick fixes at a local level, allowing business leaders basically to free up a valuable time to implement organizational change. And to paint the picture here, it's really the idea behind why the concerns of employees in a HR department with an average age of, let's say, for example, 45 plus, will be very different to employees working from the same organization in sales with an average age of 25. And this is exactly the reason why businesses may want to consider using the feedback from a framework like departmental localization to invest in more specialized well-being initiative, as opposed to blanket solutions that don't necessarily solve any specific problems and have lower engagement as a result. Last but not least, here you'll see that we've said, I've mentioned about a book club, and I think it's a great way to kind of lead by example and also open up the conversation and simultaneously improve people's knowledge and ability to respond to stressful situations. This could be done casually, maybe as like a once-a-month catch-up where business leaders and employees jump on a call to discuss what they've learned from the book and also the adjustments that they're going to make going forward. It also might be something that you could put budget behind to ensure that the majority of people that want to get involved can get involved. You could think of it as the cycle to work of book schemes, for example. And actually, just on that note, there are 3 books that I've used quite heavily for the source material of this webinar. So the first one that I'm going to be talking about just now, let's get back to a screen where it's just me. Hello, there we are. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is Finding Inner Safety. Okay, so Finding Inner Safety, the key to thriving and overcoming burnout. So it's written by a lady called Dr. Narina Ramlakhan, and she has put her professional and lived experience into this book, alongside quotes from industry-leading professionals that have influenced her career, and stories of the individuals that she's had over 25 years of assisting to kind of overcome burnout, heal trauma, and also sleep better. You also heard me mention the Polyvagal Theory. So again, this one gives us an evolutionary perspective on the responses to stress, attachment style, and also how we self-regulate. And then last but not least, you've also got, I'm actually in the middle of this one right now, The Body Keeps the Score. So written by a guy called Bessel van der Kolk, who is a Dutch author and doctor. And I'll just read the back of it here and This will just give you an idea what it's about. So it says that the effects of trauma can be devastating for sufferers, their families, and future generations. Here, one of the world's experts on traumatic stress offers a bold new paradigm for treatment, moving away from the standard talking and drug therapies and moving towards that heals the mind, body, and brain. Okay, so full disclosure, read this one through and through. In the middle of this one, as you can see there, and this one actually is referenced quite heavily in both of the other two. Hence, I've got it ready to go as soon as I've finished. So I will put a link to all of those books that you can check out in your own time in the chat just now. And have at it. Let me know how you get on. So I guess as we kind of just look to land the plane and summarize what we've spoken about over the last 45 minutes. So what have we done? We've defined what burnout is and also what sort of impact that it's kind of having on the workforce in recent times. We've also looked at the use cases and reasons for, I guess, different responses to stress. Our different responses to stress, of which there are 3 levels, if you remember. And also we've looked at the physiological impact and health implications of a person's psychological state when faced with a stressful situation. I have that book, The Body Keeps the Score, Donna Hunter. Yeah, what do you think of it? What did you kind of take from it? It's taken me on a journey so far, by the way. I'm on sort of chapter 14 out of 20, and it's it's heavy stuff, but I mean, it's great for personal development. And again, just understanding and making sense of some of the things that we've just been talking about. So yes, physiological impact and health implications of a person's psychological state when faced with a stressful situation. The 12 workplace adjustments. I'll probably do a post actually, so you guys have got those all in one place. So definitely follow me on LinkedIn because that will be coming out soon. And the links to the books that have formed some of the source material for this webinar to help you all on your individual journeys. So I guess, look, from me, if you've got value from this stream and want more content that is dedicated to helping you make the conversation about mental health, well-being, and inclusion more accessible, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the Let's Go Wellbeing YouTube channel. We've got some big projects in the pipeline coming up in the next kind of 4 weeks or so, including Mental Health Awareness Week, for which this year's theme is all about how movement affects your mental health. We're also working quite closely with a company called the Diversity Trust on a bespoke project for Ida Hobbit, which is the International Day Against Homo, Bi, and Transphobia. So if either of those subjects are of interest to you and you'd like to learn more, definitely make sure you subscribe to the Let's Go Wellbeing YouTube channel. And I guess it just be as we land the plane, a thank you from me to you for tuning in. I can see that we had just over, on average, well, it's 39 right now, but I think we had over 40 people watching for the last kind of 45 minutes or so. So guys, I hope you got value from this. Again, if you just want to be social, I am on LinkedIn as Matt Balfour. So please send me a connection when you're ready. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll speak soon. Take care.